Hello everybody and welcome to another continuation of our On the Workbench series. This is phase 2, I guess we can call it, of this big old, we'll just call him the big amethyst gemstone dragon. Now I did go in here as I was cleaning up the rest of this. I did some more cleanup work here on the rest of those gemstones and such. But what we want to do is mess around with the face to get going here. I'm making that picture bigger. So he actually has 3 eyes, it looks like. Teeth are not incredibly, they're there. A little bit of yellow there. So we can see we've got some red that we've got to add. And then we've got this greenish stuff we got to put in. So that's another element that needs to be added. There's some extra shading that we got to do there. I'm going to try and make this thing as big as I can without it getting in the way of our actual figure here. So first things first, we did put out these 2 guys. I think that's the Screaming Skull, probably Xandri Dust. Yep, there you go. So we threw these puppies out there, and we will mix those with some of the other stuff. We've got the Dawnstone here. We also have a little bit of that Warp Lightning Green. I think the palette's positioned pretty well. Let's just get into this here now. And what I will do is take some of the Wildwood. Don't really have any of the contrast medium out here. So, the heck with it. I'm going to mix a little bit of green with that. Got some of the Space Wolf's flesh too. We'll maybe a tiny bit of the Liandon blue. I'm going to try and throw a little bit of water there. Because remember, when I put the regular paints in there, it does give us a little wiggle room as far as using some water to thin it down. All I'm looking to do is just get some additional, just a little more oomph in these darks. If you're thinking, okay, what would you be doing with liner paints? I think at this point the choice would definitely be something in the way of brown liner, maybe mixed with a little bit of the gray. Alright, so I'm just going to wipe some of that away. I just needed to get some more heft in these darks. That's really doing that, a good job of that. Now, of course, this has been, it's definitely weird just doing this kind of stuff because you're reaching for what you use all the time. The liner paints, the clear paints. You start to get, I don't want to necessarily use formulaic and the most evil of terms, but it's getting there. It's pushing. It's in the zip code of formulative. So let's try and break some of those tendencies here. So that's that really all of a sudden, few seconds gave us some extra little dazzle in our darks. We are gonna put a few more of those into some of these deeper fold recesses. And as I wait for that to dry, I'm going to continue that. I know we said we were working on the face. Well, this is a part of it. We're trying to get that and the surrounding areas somewhat more finalized. And just as I look at the picture, I see that this area of the neck has a little more in the way of darker shading to it. We can do that. We can add this in. That actually has to be more of a skin color in there. When you work on larger stuff like this that has so many different elements, you just become more aware of certain elements as you go along. It's unless you sculpted the thing, which I still hope to add some sculpting type videos on the channel here for you guys. It'll be a lot of fun for me. I absolutely love sculpting. I just don't get a chance to do it hardly ever. Yeah, and this, I'm just going to make that darker. I may go back in, but see how that just starts to bring out the gemstones there a little bit more. This is kind of the ultimate balancing act, because you have that reference there, but it is a two-dimensional piece. Yes, it was done digitally, still two-dimensional, and still potentially done by an entirely, well, I'm sure, most likely done by a different artist, than the person that ended up doing the ZBrush sculpt of it. So there's that to consider. Yeah, I like that much, much more. That's good. I want to get a little more of the Leviathan blue. That's what it's called. Once again, just in here, there's a few things that I think I should enhance. And yeah, I know, I said we're working on the face, but when you've got the color sitting there, why not just go ahead and use it? And here, definitely I see, okay, down here we need some more definition in those shadows. See how that starts to already, look at this, it's just going to create more transition there, even though that is not our final, by any means, color there in the gemstones. But we'll just, yeah, a couple of those, nice little transition there. I was just waiting for the face to dry a little bit more. I think that is going to be good enough. Let's get in here now and let's see what we can add in terms of the teeth and the little bit of rosiness there. So what do we got here? I believe that is the flesh tear red. I want to take a little bit of that screaming skull. Touch of that. We're also going to take some of our dawn stone, because that's going to quite literally gray down our red here. So it's not quite so punchy. There's another word. We're just full of different colors and sayings, aren't we? Just going to put this down into these crevices here. It also makes it somewhat translucent. It's been a theme. Now where we want it to maybe be a little less translucent, maybe we'll even throw in a touch of the more of that screaming skull. And like I said, no, there's not going to be an exact replica between this and the sculpt. It's impossible, because one's a 2D drawing, the other is not. It's a 3D physical piece in your hand that's obviously being lit by many different angles, as opposed to, say, the drawing, the artwork. You can do a lot of things there that you can't necessarily do in 3D. So, okay, we're gonna put these teeth in there. They can't necessarily be too yellow. So once again, gray is mixed in there. Let's see what we can do on some of these. They're in just sort of a weird, an unusual place. I'm gonna add a little more of that yellow. I want to get those lighter. They're fairly deep down inside the sculpt, and I may have to go back in a couple of times to clean these up. That's just how it goes sometimes. And this is another thing where I can only do so much with something that's this huge and still be able to hang on to it. I'm going to just indicate a little bit of lighter stuff here. This is more just to prepare it for when we do put our more orange type color in that spot. Yeah, let's go more with our screaming skull. Taking a little bit of gray, just a touch of gray, tone that down. So the eye, that is just all we're trying to do there, is lighten that up a little bit. Now, I can tell you now that the contrast paints, they're not going to make the greatest glaze down into that crevice there. It's just going to be too much. I would prefer to just, well, make my own, or even use, say, the Green Stuff World intensity inks, because those can more easily be thinned down and used as sort of a critical little glaze, say, in the deeper recesses of the mouth here, in between these teeth. It's just the more you work with the material, the more you start to realize either potential uses or weaknesses in it. Now, Kathy, she's tried the stuff on a few of her streams, and she just doesn't like it. It's so alien to how she works. And quite logically, you would say, well, why did I spend so much time developing something that works and then completely abandon it just because somebody comes out with a new paint? Now, for me, I've had to adopt many, many different painting styles just to survive over the years. That's my story. And it's not always because the materials change, sometimes they do, but also the subject matter. When I was doing more 40K things, well, that's very different than when I was doing the Wild West Exodus stuff, than when I was doing fantasy stuff. Now, to me, a miniature is a miniature, but there's certain elements of either weathering or freehand or basing that are just a little bit different. And sometimes the thing that works really well on a Space Marine is just not going to be quite the same on a Wood Elf. What works great on a Tomb King's Skeleton Chariot may not work on an Orc Burnaboy or something like that, or Flash Git or something like that. It just might not quite work. I think most people, they tend to, when they're choosing an army, they'll choose something that really matches with their personality, what they like to see visually. You have no idea what a tremendous advantage that is, to be able to just sort of pick your poison like that. And like I said, here it's not so much. So you can see I'm trying to get in some of that green here, a slightly lighter color. I'll look and see what kind of olive green that was. I'll have to grab the jar. I forgot to look at it before we pressed on. And now we're going to continue to press on. Trying to take advantage of the darks that I put in there. And I'm just looking at that reference picture a little closer there. Let's see if I can't. And I have to say, if I can't get the pinks that I'm looking to get with these colors, I will just have to make an executive decision later and bring in some of the liner paints or clear paints, because if this doesn't match satisfactorily, sorry, that's not going to be good. So if you do see something in there that looks a little bit, well, okay, I had to do a requested, some kind of alteration had to be done. Have to be flexible there. So now we're finally starting to get a little more of the pink in there. But I'm going to try, this is one that I don't get to use very often. Where's that Vulpus pink? It's in around here somewhere. I think this is it. Let's try this and see what happens. I'm going to just get him out of the way. And we're going to just grab some of this. We'll just find a spot for it there. I don't need very much of it, so it's not going to take a whole bunch. Let's see what that does when it's mixed. That's more like it. That is what I'm looking for. And we're going to get down in here again. Just want to make sure you can see that. That's got the... It's got that little added bit of punch that I was looking for. There's also, with the way this is sculpted, what's in here is some of the texture is more intense than, say, in the drawing or the concept art, and another is it's actually a little less intense. So that is another little thing that I'm gonna have to work around here too. And I hope it doesn't sound like all I'm doing is just endlessly bashing this thing and saying how horrible it is. It's really more when you run into things yourself. I was hoping that stuff like this leaves you a little better prepared, maybe, for unexpected situations. I know when I did my pastel demos, I used to intentionally set up so-called mistakes. I would do something where the people watching would figure, oh man, that's done, that's destroyed, he's gonna have to start over again, and then just fix it right there on the spot. And that really helped him a lot, because I really hate it when I see things, they go into the purple bath or the CLR bath or whatever, and they get stripped down again. There's just really no purpose for that, because unless you are painting with some kind of super thick paint, adding just a couple more layers of paint on top of what you already did really shouldn't be that big a deal. I don't quite understand the desire to just annihilate it completely and start over when maybe you had something good going and just one little thing went astray. It is a little bit tougher to realize what went wrong necessarily. If you wipe away, it's like you're wiping away your control experiment there. So that can maybe consider that a little bit when you're thinking about, this is horrible, I'm just gonna wipe this out. I'm gonna strip this down and start over again. Alright, well, we're going back to, I think that's the, here we go. So I need some lighter grays here. I'm gonna see how light is light. Remember, it's all about context. Let's see what we can, yeah, I'm just gonna make this that much lighter. And remember, we're really focused in on the face here. So what I'll do is mess around with some of these lighter, basically almost light midtones here. I also want to remember to get those eyes in there, because that little touch of orange in there, that will make a big difference in how we see everything else too. Then this is sort of a double focal point, because it's the face, yeah, but it also has a whole bunch of tentacles on it. It's got that glowing sphere right in the area, so there's a whole bunch of attention-getting stuff in a small space, and everything else has, when you look at the rest of this, it just kind of looks like skin and gemstones. Yeah, let's see how light we can get this. It may even require another layer of some kind of dark shading too. But I think that I would want to put in there after seeing what happens with the gemstones and other parts of the body. Because we don't necessarily want to end up with a face that's highlighted to the extreme, and then the rest of the body is just kind of, well, yeah, we went to sort of a light middle tone, but yet the face has darn near white highlights on it. And two, I've been painting an awful lot of non-metallic stuff too, and that can put you in the mode of a lot of brighter highlights, more intense highlights. Those are pretty much required. If you want a metal effect, well, you got to do that. Here, well, we don't want a metal effect. In some ways, they kind of have to be muted. But then at the same time, you also have all of the gemstones that are going to need sort of a version of those strong metal style highlights. And basically, I'm counting the tentacles as part of the phase 2, so I need to get back in here. Just want to see, okay, what is going to end up being just too light. Because as light as this seems on the palette and even on here, it is certainly nowhere near white. If you would know, if there was white on here, you'd really see it. I'm just going to try it. Here, I'm going to reduce this down a little bit. Just want to make sure that we're as good as we can be on that focal point there. Now, I don't necessarily want everything that I add in here just to be that same sort of greenish color. And I guess too, if you are asking what typically something like this is sealed with, that is the Army Painter Anti-Shine. It's so weird because Army Painter, as far as paint goes, that's not really your best choice. But that anti-shine stuff, that is absolutely fantastic. I love it. The strong tones are good too, as far as Army Painter stuff goes. So that's another case of sometimes there's a company that does a material really well, and then for some reason other materials are just, they don't match up to the quality or whatever the usefulness of another. That's definitely, I think, if, because I do have the before pictures, I think that'll make a big difference. I am actually going to, I think I can get a little bit lighter here. I just took another peek over at the reference there, just seeing where I can find some lights up here on the top of the, what I'll just call the nose. And then once we get that to its lightest form, I'm actually going to take this whatever this green is and the screaming skull. See if we can make another light color here to work with. Man, if I gotta darken it back down, no big deal. Not a problem. It's definitely, it's keeping that sort of warmish green-gray feel. And also, too, when the gemstones that are in this area also, when they get a little bit more of a refinement on those, that's going to change how you view some of this. So yeah, I need to definitely start to think about some real intense lights. I'm just gonna kind of push this a little more here. And I might even throw my, just that pure white out there as well. Like I said, I think it's just skull white or whatever it is that the GW has as their effectively pure white or white scars white, whatever they call it. I'm just going to throw that out there here, like so, just to have some. Now there is a, oh gosh, what is it? What is it called? There's an orange here that I may try. Wild Rider Red. And I'll throw that out there too. Yeah, just, I don't need much. And if I need to get some yellow in there, I also have the Flash Gets Yellow, I think it is. Flash Gets Yellow. Throw a little bit of that next to it also. And I'm going to start here in the eyes. Making sure you can see that. It's not really going to look all that different just with the yellow here. It means that was pretty successful in building up the light in there. We'll do the same on the three eyes on this side. And now, let's see what I can do with the orange here. So I don't really have any of the contrast paints in here. I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'm gonna take this reference picture and just make it ginormous. Okay. So I am gonna hit the eyes with some of the, well, it's either gonna be the secret weapon, water effect, or, oh gosh, what is it, card coat, right? Some kind of glossy thing. Because there's, yeah, simulating all of those kind of highlights that are there. That's just gonna, that's not gonna be very good. And you can see we've got our, this is orange sort of transfers into that yellow just a bit. Then we've got to figure out, so it looks like there are, you got slits going for the eyes. I do want to get some lighter stuff working here. So that's just some of that pure white mixed with the Flash Gets Yellow. Making sure there's enough light there. And now let's see if something like the Wildwood will let me do my eyes here. This is clearly some either brown liner or red liner would do for this portion. So I think you can see that. I'm just gonna solidify that a touch more. And I got to do the other eyes here. And then going to just bring in a few little accents in there. So that's a very targeted, this again, brown liner is, or red liner is what I'd be using right here. Probably in this part, probably more of a red liner, I guess, but the Wildwood is what's sitting on the brush right now, and I'm just gonna go, I'm gonna run with that. So see, we're getting some definition there now. We didn't have that before. He has sort of an expression on his face a little bit. It was quite expressionless for a while. And now I feel like it has some. I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna go back in and do much more stuff in the area of these eyes here. I'm gonna take a little bit of the Leviathan blue, mix that with the Wildwood, darken that up. And we're just going to, let's see, get a little more definition. And some of these, I don't exactly know what everything is here. I was not part of the design process, so I have no idea. Now when it comes to the creature caster stuff, I have a much better idea of what the concepts are, what the goals were with the sculpting, because I see those as those are being worked on, so I know in advance what's to expect of some of these things and where some of the changes were and what the thought process was. Okay, that's what this is supposed to be. That's what this represents. See, even just that little bit, it's not even, as I make my invisible air quotes here, the correct color that should go down in there. So now this is another little test. I would say this passes the test of can it do what I would oftentimes do. Now I am going to grab a little bit of that Achillean green here. So this is something that I would definitely do with the liner paints, and it seems to work. Seems to be going okay. Seems to do what I would normally do with that, so that's sort of a plus right there. This potentially could be, say, green liner and clear blue mixed together, or even clear blue and clear green would make a pretty deep dark teal and still have that translucency. That's the interesting thing, because while they are not clear paints, they can be as translucent as these things are. So look at the definition here in that versus say what's right over here. And we're gonna shift to this part. It's part of the face here. I am only gonna spend a few more minutes on this before maybe we start to move on in a more general fashion to the shading of all of these gems. I'm doing it here because I'm considering it part of the face, and I want to see, do I want to do, yeah, well that really does, that does make a significant difference there with the way that I work. And I think most of you know, and because I've heard it said 1,000 times, that it just kind of looks like nothing, and poof, it just appears. And we're starting to enter that stage now because we've saved the juiciest of details. We didn't just dive right into those. We've saved a lot of the most impactful stuff towards the end here. Now, was I using a little brush like this early on? No, not at all. Even in the little cleanup phase that I did here in between the videos here, I was still using a big old craft brush for that. I was not using any kind of a brush this size. Just a time and a place for it. And when you can sort of wait it out a little bit and be patient, the reward is something along the lines of this, where now we really start to see, yeah, this looks entirely different. Wow, that's, and again, it's okay. We spent a grand total of about 30 minutes, maybe 35-ish if you count some of the explanations and other things. And what we got ourselves in return was some real dramatic. See, I'm even going to put some of that cooler color into these shadows here. So much more definition in this area already. Alright, well, yeah, look at the difference. So, see, imagine what happens when we do what we did here over here. Well, you don't have to imagine it, because that's just a few minutes away here. Just minutes away. Alright, you know what I am going to do? I'm going to see what happens. Yeah. I just feel like I want to get a few See it right in there. Just felt like I needed to do that. So that was pretty successful. I was hoping, and I'm talking about way back in the opening moments of the first episode, I was hoping that I would be able to do something like this right around this stage, and that it would be about as successful as that. That really does make a difference. Alright, so what we're going to do now is we'll do something similar to what we did here with these gemstones. We're going to start to do that in other areas. Now we got some other big, large facets we have to deal with here too that weren't necessarily up in here. So we're going to play around with some of, well, maybe just focus on this side here. I don't think you need to see both sides necessarily. But yeah, I think that's reasonably effective. Once this all dries too, we'll put the glossier materials on there also. So we'll be right back with that. So I'm going to continue on now with what we had done with these gemstones, creating a little more definition. I'm going to back out just a touch. So you see the difference in here from what we've got over here. So let's get in here. Just straight away, we know we need to do this. But you're also going to see in some places, like say maybe here, where we try to create a little bit of a facet right there. Maybe here we're going to shade that a hair. See right here, a little bit of shading there, and that's just using that Achillean green. Let's do some here. Now, gotta be careful. I don't want to necessarily just, I can't shade this the way I would shade the skin. I need to have that translucency to it, although these are not those fine cut gemstones. So it seems at least in the pictures, there's not as much as you would normally sort of expect maybe. Let's see how we created a few more facets. That was looking a little bit flat there, but I knew I had to just basically wait for stuff like that. So see the difference that makes versus say over here where we didn't have these additional glazes. It's all chess, remember. We're playing a little bit of chess here, and we had to think, kind of play the long game and wait for this key moment to be able to strike. Now, if that gets too intense, that's the one advantage of contrast stuff like this. It's pretty easy to wipe away. So what I will do is just this one side, because I want to have a comparison for you here. I also want to be able to get some pictures of the two sides, so you can get that much better sense of what it started with and then what it ended with. We'll go all the way down here to the foot, and there's nothing that stops me from then taking my lightest color and going back in here, and we'll do that. That's kind of a next stage maybe. I might go in and do that, or what I might do is go into some of the skin tones and try and find some lighter things there, because as always, we're trying to look for context, and if I've got super bright highlights here, then everything as far as this is going to look too dark. It's basically, what do I want as a reference comparison point? Do I want to be comparing the lightest parts of the skin tone, or the lightest parts of the gemstone to the lightest part of the skin tone, or vice versa? So I can even, like I said, I can add a little more dark to some of these areas. Now I can even, Okay, where is it? That is this stuff, the Sotec green. Just gonna put a little bit of that out here. Just a touch. And good, there's an open spot. We'll mix some of that with the Archelian green, but see how that changes it now? It's weird it's not as dark. However, while it may not physically look as dark, it's more opaque. So then it's kind of de facto covers better, or has better coverage, I suppose. Yeah, words are not going to go well tonight. There's a whole lot of fatigue at work here. A whole lot of fatigue to be filming until 3-ish in the morning and then to rise and shine at 7 something. There. So again, much different than, say, what we have here, or especially here on the back. So I'll see if, like I said, this could go on for hours, and it does get a little repetitive, so I don't know if you necessarily need to see that same process, like I said, over and over again. See, just a simple thing of working from what I can see there. I can see a little bit of shape there, and I just tried to play off of that little bit of shape where I can to create these rough facets. Sometimes just I'll add some water just to make it flow. And you can say I alternate between some of just these straight up Archelian contrast stuff versus the Archelian, what was that again? The Sotec green mix. And this will also change once again when we add those really dramatic final highlights. But even just that, it makes such a huge difference here to this. And there is nothing that says, well, you can't do a second layer or whatever layer. Yes, you can. Just let the first one dry and throw in a second one. And I think you can see how these start to take a little more shape, definition, whatever the word you want to use. I think they all kind of mean the same thing. And I think at this point too, this is now where I start to maybe get some different colorations in my gemstones. I can see a little of the green is sort of left behind because we're starting to add more of a bluish teal. So the green that has a little more yellow in it, that starts to maybe recede in some places, but it's still there. Still there. And some of these, they're not real clear which way the facets should go. Sometimes I just have to find my way. Just have to sort of explore. And then there are still some where I wasn't entirely sure, well, is that a gemstone or is that just a bump on the skin? Sometimes it is really hard to tell. See what that did right there? That, again, that little bit of a glaze. And all the while I had to make sure that I left myself enough room here to maneuver in. So I could even, I'm going to take some of the Leviathan blue and some of the Warpstone green. And now you'll see an even more dramatic See how much darker that is even? Down even more into the recesses, but like here where things got a little crazy, well, I'm just gonna do something like that and grab a little of this. So yeah, I didn't like what happened there. I'm just gonna modify that a little bit. See, now there's a little bit of a smoother transition there, whereas before it just kind of looked like a big old mass with a super hard edge that just wasn't quite right. And this is, so we're back to sort of mixing the contrast paints and the regular paints once again to make some of that semi-translucent stuff to work with. Where are we going here? Let's go back to again. See if we can't get some really nice action here on this. Some of these largest of gems. And then, yeah, see, this is where I can sort of fade this down. And I can even do some of these, maybe some linear things like this. And I don't like it. There's nothing that says I can't just wipe that away. And we find one, say we did something like, okay, yeah, I didn't really like that. Make a little change. And we'll just, so what we'll do is we'll stick with this side over here for the most part, and then I'll just do the other side off camera because it'll take quite a while. Might do some down in the on the back here a little bit just to see what's going to happen there, because that's going to be a tricky section there, without a doubt. That is not going to be simple. And I'm definitely going to, I think I'll go back into some of the skin areas here before I go in with that brightest skin color. So here, see, I'm going to just wipe some of that away. I'm going to go back in. This is my, going to throw a touch of green in there. I'm going to try and, good, you can see it. You can see what I'm trying to see, the difference now between those two facets. It was really minimal before, but I did that, and look at what we're going to do here. So where there was very little definition, now there's a bunch. And one thing I also have to be aware of is those contrast paints, they will dry differently. They may dry lighter. It's not like the color necessarily is going to shift, but they will sometimes dry lighter, and I got to be aware of that, because there's been a few times where I thought, okay, that is good enough as far as a dark glaze goes or whatever, and then come back to it and go, ooh, okay, yeah, not enough. Got to go back in. See, like right here, this, that sets off those two additional stones right there. We're going to do this. It sets off that one. We're going to go here. But this is still more time efficient than if I was to go in. Can you imagine trying to paint each and every one of these just one at a time without all this, say, the gray mostly pre-period around it. Just that would be a nightmarish situation, at least as far as I'm concerned it would be. So there, see, we just found another little facet right there. Found another one here, another one here. And that there will be times where you don't necessarily like it and you can either wipe it away or you can find a way to alter that. Here, I'm going to take some of here's some of the white. And where's my, here it is. I'll just throw that in there. Because sometimes just something went awry with either a highlight or whatever. Now let's get to the back of this here. So again, more of the Archelian green, some of that, a little bit of the Sotek green. Now let's work our way down. This would be a tough one because your light's sort of pointed straight down at this, so it's harder to do the facets the way we were on the side. Because when you're doing from the side like this, it's easy to get that darker up here, lighter down here effect. When you're looking straight down at it, that becomes tricky, to say the least. But much like the ones on his head, I think even the occasional definition like this that's going to be helpful even just by itself. And so we're going to let that contrast paint just flow down in there. So we're obviously, it's the contrast paint, but 10 times the amount of control. Remember at the beginning when it was pretty much laissez-faire, just letting it go wherever the heck it wanted to go, with a little bit of control in some places. This is certainly a much tighter control. And as I said, I will certainly have to go back into this with some, maybe even, because I just don't know if I have the right teal, the light teal colors here. Because when I lighten up that Sotek green, it has a little bit of grayishness to it, whereas say the clear and liner paints, those are just so intense. I don't have to worry about those graying each other down. They don't do that. Now see here, I can start to build up a little bit of a darker facet in some of these. As we work our way up onto, which I'll just call the shoulders, which they technically may not be shoulders. So here's again, see, working a little bit of a dark facet there. So I can find some places here the problem is, can you see those? I don't know if you can, because whatever these back tentacles are, they do really hide a lot of what it is I'm trying to do in here. But I am glad that there is that bit of difference between some of the stuff that's a little more blue and then a little tilted more towards the green. Yeah, so there's some of these I'm just not even going to do right there because they're just completely covered by these large tentacles across the back. Let's see if I can't just make something here, because there's no actual, it's just very round there. So I'm essentially just sort of trying to create, once again, a facet where there's really not one that's sculpted there. I just feel like it's too boring without it. And here's another couple of areas there. So there, and here, and here. Like I said, just trying to maybe force the issue a bit and square off something that's maybe not necessarily quite so square. And sometimes I have to just kind of alter the shape of the gemstone just to work with, because I'm trying to make things turn here. So even though the gemstone might be sculpted one way, if I paint it that way, actually it doesn't really translate. And I don't know if that makes much sense at all. So this, again, it's another one of those where I got a big old gemstone here, and I'm just trying to get a little bit of extra dark there on some of those facets. And like I said, sometimes creating one where maybe there wasn't one to start with. And the other thing too is, by having a little variation in where some of the light is directed on these, they also look like they're a little more, they're not all positioned in neat little rows, because they are not, that's for sure. They're definitely not positioned in neat little rows. Most certainly not. All right. But that certainly looks different there. That definitely has so much more difference. As I work here where I hadn't done anything, huge difference. Now we'll see what happens when we work with some of our grays in here. That's not going to have anywhere near the dramatic effect as what we added here. But I don't want to, I'm sort of, gosh, how do I even phrase it? I'm sort of looking for something that now is going back towards the muted side, because once I start getting into, say, those white highlights here and some of these to really make them crisp, this stuff is going to get toned down that much more, and it'll be that much harder to resist, because here we wanted to have more exciting lights. I don't necessarily want that in every other area here on some of these skin areas. Just gotta be mindful of that. So can you, I guess you can sort of see that. Yeah, just go over here to where it's just going to be easier for you to see what I'm doing. See, just right there. Now this, see, it's more than just lining. And if I was to do this with the clearant liner paints, that's not black lining. I really just, I wish that term never would have been created, because there's no black in here and we're not putting lines. We're actually making shapes. We're adding definition to this. And once we get that last little element of crispness there, when we add the white along that, boy, that's really going to make a big old difference there. See, just a couple of these. I'm going to try and go more with the Archelian green down in here. Like I said, to get some, let it flow down in there. It's supposed to have that capillary action, right? And we're sort of depositing it in a super targeted way using that's a Winsor Newton Series 7 there. But I've certainly saved it a lot of wear and tear by going ahead and doing all that other work before with my big old craft brushes and such. Even this is putting some significant wear and tear on this. As gentle as I'm trying to be with this, but just the nature of the way this thing is and what I've got to do, it just calls for me to use the brush in this way. There's another area where I want to get some kind of a facet here, something here. Just anything to designate some shape. So right here, good, you can see that. Now I hope this may be, I don't know, it's an Eldar stuff or a high elf dragon or whatever, that you can translate some of the stuff that you see me doing here at some point. Maybe you're painting a base that has a whole bunch of crystals on it or whatever, or gemstones, whatever the case may be, and maybe you sort of refer back to this. And I've got, there's sort of an amber dragon, there's one that's more red, so you'll see plenty more. Maybe not one right after the other, but I'm trying to film as much of this process as I can for you. See how we just altered that one right there? That little bit, couple of brush strokes, completely changed what we had there. Sometimes just keeping it simple like that is the way to go. Less can be more. Now this one's going to be tougher here because I've got to work around whatever his tail and all that sort of assembly there. But on that, okay, I think, yeah, it's in the screen. See, there's not a really clean line of demarcation for me to follow here. I sort of have to, I've been sort of struggling figuring out exactly where that should be. But that was in the early stages where I was just pushing around some of the lighter stuff, the mid-tones, and now I've had a few chances to kind of say, okay, how should that look? Instead of me getting frustrated just trying to paint that one little tiny area. I just sort of said, I'll deal with it later. I moved on. And I guess that's another suggestion too. I've seen there are times where you just have to say, you know what, I got to work on something else. I'm getting frustrated here, and frustration, it never leads to positive things. So sometimes when you can just sense that things are a little too irritating, you do something else, maybe something a lot simpler, maybe just paint some bases. And usually I try to mention this. I think maybe it happens more in the army painting stuff, but I don't just leap right out of unconsciousness from bed and just start doing stuff like this. Now, you don't have hours and hours to essentially warm up the way I do, but I do recommend that you paint some simpler things first, enjoy a little bit of success, and then maybe tackle some of the more complicated stuff. Move into that gradually instead of poof right off the bat. That can maybe save you some trouble. And if you got a couple of things that you're working on at once, maybe you just say, not really feeling it on this one tonight, or something just kind of you can feel it going a little haywire, a little sideways. You say, nope, we're just going to put this away. Put this away before something really unfortunate happens. Something that's going to take a whole lot longer to undo. Alright, we've done pretty well here. This is actually, well, it hasn't necessarily moved along really quick because there's an awful lot of areas you can't even see me paint. But actually, it's less than I thought it was going to be. I really thought that just for me, I'd be lucky if I could just do one side of this and show you. But it certainly does make a dramatic difference, doesn't it? Even here along his tail. And you can see some of these I've gone back into them a second, third, fourth, fifth time. And that's still not even as dark as I can get. I can get even darker here. I can push this just a little more in a few places. And notice I'm focusing on the shoulder, on points, extrusion points, where things are really sticking out there. Let's go back to this side, see if there's any kind of areas like that I should maybe think about on this side. Or maybe just get some of this down into some of these crevices to really reinforce some darks there. Maybe even here on the toes there. See if I can't. Is that okay? I think you can see it. Let's see, where are we going here? And there's still actually a little bit of the regular paint. A little bit of the Sotek green is left in there, in this mix, even though it's mostly at this stage the Achillean green. Again, if I'm pronouncing that wrong, I really don't care. I just wish that, and I understand why with the names and all that kind of stuff, because it's the lore, whatever. It was something that I really appreciated about the slow fuse monument paints there. They just, yeah, it's green, it's blue. Oh look, it's light purple. So see, now we've got this little cluster of smaller gems there. They have some separation from the rest. Let's see. Now I'm gonna put a little bit more of this back out there. Go with some of the green here. This, in a way, is more of a middle tone. What's interesting is that it is just visually, it looks way lighter than what's right next to it here on the palette. However, because it's opaque and not translucent, it covers more, and it's just giving us a whole different result there. See it right there? This is another facet. That's mostly being created by more along the lines of opaque paint as opposed to this much more Archelian green in the mix. Okay, so what I'm going to do is finish off that sort of stuff, and then we'll get back into our skin tone, see if we can't find the sort of the final lights and darks in that area too, a little bit like what we did on the face over here. So we'll be right back with that. The next thing we're looking to do is add some more details here to the skin. Do that in a couple of ways. We can add more lights, we can add more darks. At this point, we're just going to work a little bit more on that lighter side of things. And I'm actually going to make sure a little bit of green gets in here. So that's a couple of the greenish, that Archelian green, and then the Warp Lightning green. Let's see what kind of little bit of a highlight. Yeah. Part of it is looking for highlights, but I don't know if you can see it. There's a lot of this texture here. Little bumps, almost looking like barnacles, whatever. So it's in addition to, say, some of the just general highlights on the skin or the folds, there's that little bit of texture that I'm trying to pick up too. Have to do that pretty mildly though. If it's too much, well, then it's just going to compete with all of these little gemstone things. So I think maybe you can see what I'm doing. I might actually try and go one step closer here. And at the same time, start to think about some of these edges where you've got, see, things like these gemstones here. I don't want those to have a hard outline. That would just, it really, while it wouldn't look horrible, I've seen heavily outlined things that can look okay. It's very, well, just use the word stylized. And there's nothing wrong with stylized. Actually, boy, oh boy, this goes back a long way. We're talking the early 2000s here. We're back in the days of Cool Mini or Not. And there was one person, I wish I could remember the name of the painter. And I'm sure their stuff might still be up on Cool Mini or Not all these years later. But they had they had a style of, it was really, well, stylized, to use the word. Everything was always in shades of pastel reds, and the darkest dark value. Never, if you're talking a 1 to 10 value scale, see how we're just working our way around here? Not creating a hard outline, but starting to create a little definition between those two things, the gemstones and the skin color there. Well, it was a very, oh gosh, Blanc or whatever. I just can't remember the name. It's been too many years, unfortunately. But it wasn't necessary. It wasn't for everybody. Not everybody liked it, but it was unique. Every time you saw one of those miniatures, you knew exactly who it was. There was no doubt who had painted it. It was a really individual style. Not for everybody, but it was distinct, and I almost wonder if we've kind of lost that a little bit. I don't know, because you can't see everything. This is also the early days of things like Cool Mini or Not, where you had these there was no Facebook then. There was nothing like that whatsoever. So I think it was maybe a little harder for people to see what other people were doing, and things start to kind of coalesce into broader painting styles. It can be difficult to, there's a few painters today where you look at their stuff and you know exactly who did it. And you wouldn't even need a name on the Instagram post or the Facebook post or whatever. You just say, I see that, and I know exactly who did that. They have a really distinct way, a distinct look to their stuff. Now, I think it's a little bit easier to do that when you are painting under the control of, well, this is the stuff that I like to paint. This is the stuff I want to paint. It can be much harder to do that when, yeah, I suppose you could still do it when you're doing armies, but when you're painting for other people, while they are painting to have your style, your method, there's a certain amount of control they want to exercise over things, and that can take away from a little bit of that individuality. To me, that was why I liked messing with the oils, because so few people use oils for miniatures. I thought, okay, that's another way of just, when people see it, they'll just say, yeah, that's got to be this person. There's no doubt about it. And I think you can see the texture that's being added a little bit better here. There's a lot of these little almost barnacle type bumps right here, because I don't want these to be smooth, completely smooth, gentle brush strokes here. So that's just not the texture that's in this skin. It's sort of heavily barnacled and textured. This is a relatively light color, so I might have to go in there and actually darken some things in the shadows. But I think that's going to be later off camera, because like I said, we're trying to control the times of these videos. We've already spent, at least according to my little time log here, we've already spent 70 minutes. And this is another half an hour. Well, you're already at 100. We still got to get to the highlights on all these gemstones there. And that's going to be a two-stage process. And for that, I'm just going to have to use some of my Reaper paints, because I just can't quite get what I need, because I don't have the equivalent in GW. I'm sure there is some, and I apologize for not making everything 100% GW in this one. I really tried, but GW paints, they tend to be a little bit on the thick side, tend to be a little bit on the shiny side. Now that's relative, because the Reaper liner and clear paints, well, heck, those are flatter than most Reaper paints. So it's not this, I'm not saying that, oh man, GW paints, you should never use those because they're shiny. It's all, like I said, it's relative to the stuff that I use. The secret weapon paints, those are geared to be flatter than flat, because they're supposed to be showing weathering. See that little bit of a highlight that I put underneath there? It just makes it look like that gemstone kind of protruding from the skin. We got another one that's sort of along the same lines there. And there's another, all this texture, it's great and all that, but boy, it's also increased the difficulty of trying to hide mold lines and or seams. And this is true for anybody that's working on a miniature. Just getting rid of those mold lines. It can be the texture around it, not the mold line itself, that can make it painful to get rid of. Because see, there's just so much texture here that if you're trying to, say, run some green stuff in there, or even some plastic putty, I usually use the Vallejo plastic putty. That can be problematic, to say the least, because you've got to restore somehow all that lumpy, bumpy texture there. And sometimes you just end up losing it, and the only way you just have to sort of simulate that with the brush strokes. When I used to sculpt, this is way back in the day, long before we were so-called miniature painters or whatever, and I would sculpt my Blood Bowl big guys, there were many times where I would just paint in certain details, because it was easier to do that than it was to sculpt them in. So I suppose I'm kind of used to that. See, I think that, yeah, See, that starts to make that gemstone look more like it's part of the body rather than it's just sort of superimposed on it. Like it's been stuck on there like a Photoshop clone brush or something. So these are the sort of things that it's just best to wait instead of jumping right to these. Let's say I hadn't done all of the stuff that I've done so far on the gemstones, but I leapt right into these sort of brighter highlights. Well, I know this is as bright as I can go. And believe me, it's not that bright. It would barely even be maybe as bright as that. It looks darker because of what it's next to. That's for sure. But like I said, with these gemstones here, the last thing I wanted to do was that super bright highlighting. Look at, that's not even white there. Look at how much darker this is compared to white. So I guess that's the best indicator of what it is that we're going for here. Now this, again, have to get some lights in here because, well, this is actually facing towards where the light source would be. And this may be, there might be some departure perhaps from that concept art reference, because they didn't have to worry about all three dimensions here. They didn't have to worry about a top and a bottom and a back. All they had to worry about was what was facing the viewer. And I've used 2D photo references for my armies where I wanted to get to a certain effect or whatever, and you see reference images that you really like and you're trying to replicate that on your actual miniature, and it can sometimes be pretty difficult. And this is difficult, and we're talking about a miniature that's based on the concept art that you see in the image. Because yeah, there's been plenty of times I would grab a reference image, I'd be all happy and just real anxious to see how it would work out and make a miniature look just like it. Well, yeah, didn't quite work out the way I originally thought it would because, well, they were two very different things. Once again, trying to get differential between, just cleaning up that edge there. And this is almost, in a way, that's that negative painting. It's a watercolor term. You're essentially painting what's not there, as opposed to painting in a line. By painting around it, we simulate that line. And I didn't really see these little ridges like this before. Think of how long I've been working on this. Not including the filming time. We're talking 7-ish, some 8-ish hours, whatever, and never ever noticed those before. This is really the first time I'm seeing them. So getting to know the sculpt, I suppose that is another important thing too. That was why I like to actually hand brush the primer on. By just brushing the primer on by hand, it was almost like I got to pre-paint the surface before actual painting. And that proved to be kind of advantageous. Oh, if you're wondering what I've been using to thin this stuff down, nothing but water. There is actually some contrast paint in here. I couldn't tell you what. It's mostly just sludge. We're sort of working with palette sludge here. Yeah, well, I'm really starting to notice those little ridge lines there. I didn't see them before until now. Did not see those before. And I'll actually on stuff like these guys here, these big old monsters, I'll try to have what's in effect a photo gallery for you. Just some finished images from the top, from the sides. I know that tends to just add to the time of the video, and it's not really a lesson at all. I'm not saying anything. Heck, I don't even put music on that part, but it could be helpful for you maybe to see some of the finished images of this guy. And just overall, now having worked with this stuff, I want to say with the contrast paint and just GW paints here in general, for the better part of, wow, 20-ish hours in the last few weeks. I mean, they're not really my favorite. They're no way they're gonna replace my Reaper stuff, because I worked on this a little bit more here, and he's kind of similar, but he's got some more things going on. This was easier. This was faster. This was easier. It felt like normal here, and I don't have to hit it so much with dull coat to try and cut down on some of the shine, which is why the next one that you'll see, well, hopefully it ends up being posted in that order, but I'm filming another one right after this, along with some other stuff, and that's going to go back to the Reaper paints. Because now you see, okay, how would I approach something like this with the contrast paints? Well, it's time you saw what I would do with the method that you've seen me do many times. So we just got a little bit of the texture there, and then did the same thing. So you're just looking to get some of that bumpy texture. May even go over that some more. But I don't want to lose the dark that's in here. Let's see, where else? Gonna go back into here again. Looks like you can see it. And it's gonna be interesting with that final light on those gemstones. Because even there, if each one is highlighted equally, that's going to become a distraction. You don't really want to have those highlighted to death all to the same exact degree. Now what I may do, I'm going to take a little more of that, the screaming skull there. I might just hit these highlights on the face a touch more, because I'm putting the highlights everywhere else, and all of a sudden it diminishes these highlights by adding all those other ones. And the other thing I also have to do, remember, I got to put I could use the art coat, whatever. I could use the secret weapon stuff. Maybe I'll just go with the art coat, because we're trying to use GW stuff here. So yeah, I definitely think I want to get those last little extra lights here as we get up towards the face. Even see a couple of these here. Just trying to bring out folds in the skin and the neck. I'm going to do a similar thing over on this side. And here we are. Look at that. We'll do the same thing here. We got another one of those little ridge lines. And as I look around, I can just see where, okay, there's not enough definition over here. Gotta get a little more over here. So that's starting to, and these, the highlight's getting a little bit on the warmer side too because of that screaming skull, that off-white. So instead of the off-white, say, maiden flesh, the screaming skull has sort of become the off-white of choice here on the GW stuff. It's a little more on the yellowish side than, say, the maiden flesh is. So here's another, it's an additional layer of those little bumps there. So I'm trying to layer that texture a little bit. Not necessarily painting this over the top of where, say, the last layer, if you want to call it that, where it's not quite as light as this. Slightly offset. Then you start to see that these folds here, it's not every single place. There's some spacing here. So what we'll do is we'll hit these, because these are also higher, and then they start to disappear as you go down. See, we make them a little less frequent. A little less frequent as we go down. And that's also another way we get stuff to look like it's, yeah, see here, there's a whole gemstone that wasn't painted. It looked like, to me, like it was skin tone. And again, how long have we been working on this thing? And it just didn't seem that way to me. There's a couple more gemstones over there. So before I hit the next scene, well, obviously I'm going to go in there and get some of that skin color or some of the gem color in there, because that's just the Archelian green. Well, heck, I can do it right now. Let's just do that. And we'll take a little bit of our, yeah. Before we forget, we'll just nail these down here real quick. Do I see anything else? Like I said, I'll do some cleanup things that I can only do when I can be sure I've got a grip on this thing. Because there's been a couple of times, even just now, I almost dropped this thing. It's not the easiest thing to hang on to. I also recommend, I got the glove on here. Well, it serves several purposes. So I'm going to add a little more dark into here. It keeps the paint from being rubbed off, or it keeps the miniature from getting oily, because the oil will transfer from your skin to the miniature. It was something I learned the hard way years ago. I look at it and I go, what is this? Why is the paint not even going on it? That's the level of oil that you're... Maybe I just have oily skin. I don't know. But I think that's pretty much common for everybody. So that's another way to sort of avoid that hassle. And I don't mind if a little bit of that green gets in there, but you know, I got this gray. Let's see if I can't warm this up. Maybe take it off of the green a touch. That's the Dawn Stone there. That's that regular GW color. And it just gives it shifts it back towards a little touch of red. And that's what I've been trying to do, is balance that red and that green off of each other. And it's not going to even look red or green. Now, that other one that I showed you that I did with the Reaper paint, That's got a little more clearly defined greenishness to it than, say, this one where I saw a whole lot of that combination of the red and the green. Actually, I think I want to even get a little more of a light color on the tentacles here. See if I can't do that. Push it a tiny bit more here. On the end of that one up here, there's these little not spiky things, but again, more of these little bumps or whatever the heck they are. These pieces were actually metal right here. All of these tentacles. Yeah, those kind of were disappearing. Now they've come back a touch. Where are we at? Oh, good. I think you can see that. I'm going to see if I can't. Just right here. This is a little bit of a, shall we say, executive decision right there to, once again, try and bring in some more impact on the face, because you can only add so much in the way of darks. And this is that one final type of contrast. In a way, it's similar to what we're going to be doing to the gemstones. That's just a few minutes away. Here, let's... Is that... Oh, good. That's on screen. It's weird. In some ways, this larger figure was... Well, I guess it was easier to keep on screen because I had the camera so backed out. You know, it's not zoomed in like it is on some of the smaller miniatures. Now, this guy, as big as he is, he's relatively compact. The other one, well, I'll show it to you maybe here. There's other figures that have much bigger wings than this, like some of the Creature Caster, some of the Big Child, the Nocturna figures. The sheer size of those is one thing, but there's details that I want you to be able to see. Like at some of the Nocturna figures, their faces are sculpted really nicely. And I want you to be able to see all the stuff I'm doing on those faces. Yeah, speaking of faces, yeah, he's got a lot more oomph on him. And what we're going to do here before we close this out, I'm going to look for some of the art coat. Here it is. And I'm just going to get me a different brush here. And I am going to just brush a little bit of that over the eyes. I think it'll give me a textural difference. One thing I notice is that this does not... The Secret Weapon water effects just tend to have a little more longevity to them. They tend to do a little bit more. Okay, so I'm going to have to leave this back here. I'm just going to go right over those eyes. And that, oh, yeah, even just that tiny bit of extra transparency and texture, that little bit of glossiness, I think helps. Yep. So that works. That works there. So what we'll do then, I'll give you a quick little preview of what's going to happen. So you've seen this before, the maggot white. And I do apologize for having the much brighter LED lights going here. Just I needed to be able to see something that there would have been too many shadows with this guy. I think you can understand just the nature of them. There would have been way too many shadows. So here we go. I'm just going to give a quick little preview of what we're doing. And remember, this is not white. This is an off-white. I might maybe even tone it down in some spots. Who knows? But this is all I'm after. Just creating a few little facets here. But it also, in some areas, can tidy things up. And it may even just take the form of a dot. Because this is sort of, now we're getting into that non-metallic almost, like I talked about earlier. See, that squares that off a little bit. Now when you compare it to what's over here, that almost looks kind of dull by comparison to the sharpness here. So we're doing several things where by clearing up some of the lines, even here where it just looks sort of on the mushy side, even a few of these lines makes a tremendous difference. Big difference. But I don't want to make it look like an erector set, which means don't go too crazy with these lines. Less is more. It's just like chipping or any kind of weathering or rust streaks or anything like that, or mud. Too much can be too much, and it can be too much in a hurry. Ooh, I gotta write that down. Oh, I'm gonna have to write that down right now. It's a good thing we're ending this little clip right here. Let me write that down. Alright, so this is what we're gonna do next. For the last phase of the video here, we're gonna be doing some of this. We're gonna be finding our places here on the face, other spots where we can really increase the faceted nature of these gemstones. We'll be right back with that. So we've added that maggot white to the palette, and now we're going to add ourselves some facets here, tidying up some of these lines. And in some cases it's just a dot, and that is, like I said, it's not all that dissimilar to things that we have done with our non-metallics. And I think what I'll do is, first and foremost, I'm going to focus on the areas that, well, the eye can just see easier, areas that should be of prime interest. And then I will move down. I'll do some of maybe the feet. So see, this is, it's not a complete line, it's a partial line there. That's going to be the key thing. Now I've actually got a little pile of that stuff closer to me, I don't necessarily want to have to be reaching across this to the palette. So see, there wasn't much in the way of shape there. I just kind of created a little bit of a star shape pattern right in there. And you can see, like here it's heavier and then it fades away, heavier, fades away. Because if it's perfectly almost outlined, yeah, that's not going to work either. It won't be convincing. We go back to that stylized thing again. And then geez, I don't know if I can even find those pictures I was telling you about, some of those miniatures on Cool Mini or not. Maybe the gallery is still there and I could see them. But there were people that wanted to imitate that style, and that sort of became a thing where you had the darkest value being maybe a middle tone. I mean, that was your darkest shadow color. And maybe that's not for you, and it's certainly today where we've kind of gone in a whole different direction where, and I don't want to pigeonhole it into extreme highlighting, but we have much more dramatic lights and darks. That's the norm for today. But it wasn't always that way. And it won't always be that way. Who knows, next year there could be a whole nother thing that sort of becomes a trend. Now there are all these, well, okay, there's your contrast paints, you have the Nocturna Kickstarter, you've got the paints in the tubes that everybody's talking about. Maybe those will do something that sets a different trend. But the only way to start a trend yourself is to just say, okay, that's what everybody else is doing. I just want to try something different. The thing is, it may not always work, and well, there's always going to be people that hate it. There's we like to talk a lot about I remember back in the day, well, and it's still there, the non-metallic versus metallic, and the two sides hate each other, but even now those factions have broken into their own sub-factions. Who would have thought that miniature painting would be just such a controversial thing that everybody would have to fight over? And rest assured, I have things prepared for doing metallics of different types. I just want to do out of curiosity, because I've had to do a few metallics now for things, say, like historicals. And remember the Vallejo metal medium and the experiments with that? I like to do some more of that. I also have, like I said, the Green Stuff World metallic paints, and there's a bunch of different colors there, including one that looks suspiciously like a metal medium. I got Reaper metallics, I got Secret Weapon metallics, there's the Slow Fuse / Creature Caster / Monument metallic paints. Why would I not want to just experiment with that, see what happens? Does it mean I'm going to give up non-metallic painting? Well, definitely not, because in terms of the people that pay us to paint figures, well, we have to match things. And matching things, as I add lights here, that means non-metallics. That's why I haven't been able to just rush into those. Yeah, see how that separates those from the face even more, though? Yeah. Here, let's... And some of these things, they're virtually round. So some of these facets that are being drawn in, they're not actually following any specific texture. That is me trying to put that texture in by hand myself. The tricky thing, the closer you get to white, and I think some of you have noticed this, it's just harder to keep that paint thinned down. It really gets troublesome. Well, that's just the nature of white. There were some questions I had to answer today about white primer and why that wasn't covering when it was brushed on. It's just the nature of white. That's another reason why I just try to avoid using that as much as possible. That I find other ways of getting those, maybe by more darks or things in the midtones. So once again, and these on the face. Here, let's hit a couple of these on the tail. And it has to be ever so slight and gentle, because if I really go in here and just do a whole bunch of white lines on these, my much bigger gemstones, they sort of lose their credibility. And we're just trying to catch points, because that's what these things like metal, things like these gemstones, anything that is a shiny type surface or reflective, they sort of catch the light, which is why an outline of white just, you'll see the form, but it's not going to take the form you want. Oh my goodness, there's another saying. But we're not gonna put that in the wise old sayings. I might have to start putting a quote of the video somewhere in some of these. Maybe in the opening credits or something, I might start to add that. If you see that, that's just me entertaining myself. Yeah, see how that just, look at this, right here. Bam. I didn't paint in necessarily a lot of shading there. Here's another one. And I was counting on this. This is kind of rounded here. What I am going to do is a few lines like that. And it almost breaks it up too. See, there's here, let me get that a little more watered down, and hopefully, there. I was looking to do something like that. See, even something along those lines, those little hashes right there, those little hashes like that. That's, I was relying on that again to give me, it's almost like I'm being a jeweler here and trying to cut all these raw gemstones into something. And that just, see how that created a bunch of extra shape. Let's hit this back leg here, see what we get with that. Alright. Now here we start to get underneath these gigantic shoulder tentacles, whatever the heck they're supposed to be. Which also then means it can't quite go as light. Also, you won't be able to see them. So those are ones that I'll certainly do off camera. And I think if I can get a good 6-7 images for you in the kind of that finished gallery there. And remember, we haven't done white yet. I just wanted to remind you of that. I'm just trying to go through here first. Maybe I'll just focus on this side then, because I want to see what happens when I get to the brightest whites. Now we got to also, yeah, see some of these you can't even hardly see what I'm doing here. This has to be very minimal, because that really is in shadow. And you can see how if I don't like what it is, I remove it right away. Let's see if I can't get a couple of these, especially on these toenails here. Now this is really top heavy here. This is tough for me to hang on to. There's a lot of weight that I'm just barely holding here. So if it's a little shaky or if it moves maybe in a weird direction, that's just me trying not to drop this thing. Alright, can you see that? I think you can. I've been really waiting to do that for a while on these toes here because they look clearly defined, and then when you go to paint the stuff on there, you can see it's got a little bit of roundness to it, because obviously they weren't supposed to be pure, finely cut gemstones. Now, I think on the artwork the surfaces are a whole lot sharper, whereas these, they got a little more rounded. So yeah, see, and it creates a little bit of turn this way because the gems that are further away from us don't have quite the same kind of definition. actually going to get, since I've got some of this light color here. We never did do our lightest stuff in here. Where are we at? There we go. Looking to get a couple of these little bumps on this highlighted. Couple of extra little lights on that to really give it some brightness. Here, let's hit this. Gonna work my way again down to these toes here. There's kind of an open space here on the base that I can really hold. So I think I can lock this into position here, and then you can see. Alright, we'll go ahead and hit these. Alright, a little more here. Yeah, just gotta get some of these that just have an awful lot of roundness to them. I gotta give them some kind of... See, even that right there, that extra little line there, this needs a line here. We're gonna do another one there and then a third one there. We're thinking sort of trapezoids. And you can see some of these, like here, we did more of a light there. Maybe we'll do a small bit of a light there on top of that. And you can see some of these gemstones here, all they get is a little touch of a light. That's it. This needs more definition along here. See on that top surface there, and then a little bit like that. And that was actually one flat surface, but instead of me trying to blend that out, I just said screw it, and I turned it into a facet. It was faster to do that. See, there's another one where I just said, the heck with it, that's going to be a facet now. Oh boy, heaven forbid I should say that I'm becoming a facet hound. But I'm going to do that because I painted enough of these darn things. I deserve a pun. I earned one. Here, let's do this big old one here. See what we got. Just have some fun with this. Now, gonna go down here, and the idea is to maybe kind of do like a facet within a facet. So this, that's more like the imperfection there inside the facet itself. We're gonna create another one here. Watch this. Can you watch? Yeah, okay, I turned it a little bit. See it right there. There's no actual facet there, I just made one. I just had to sort of invent that one on the fly. I'm gonna move this over here. Alright, once again making some more facets here. I know that in my back pocket I still have my straight up white that I can use. It's not going to be all that much different than this. And if need be too, if I really want to get some massive contrast, then I can go back in with some of my darkest darks. And if we were talking about liner paints, that's right, pretty much go, I mean, if I wanted to go super dark, I could go blue liner and green liner, mix those two together, and I'd have the most intense dark turquoise. Might throw a little touch of the clear blue in with that, or go the other way around, blue liner with clear green to give it a little bit of brightness, a little, because the liner paints do have essentially what's tantamount to almost like a black mixed in with them. So here, let's get this. We got this gem here. What am I doing? I'm going to focus there first, and then it's sort of a broken line. See, we didn't continue that. Now here, start here, work our way up like this. We're just going to draw in a few little lines there. Yeah, we're trying to simulate that type of surface, because it's not necessarily all quite there for us to work with. Yeah, here's a couple more. Let's play with these. I'm gonna move this around so I can get a good hold on it. All right, there. Yeah, turn this almost upside down because I need to be able to get the brush working in a certain way. So once again, gotta get a little bit of a, it's not quite an outline there, but see, I'm gonna do a couple of, it's almost like it's been chipped a little bit, or it's a little touch fractured or something there. Sometimes the more mysterious it is, the more interesting it is. Because if it's all spelled out, usually an astute observer is just going to lose interest. So here's another one where we need to get a little more into this, a little more into this facet here. So see, just doing that, it's not a full 100% outline. It's just a gentle little nudge there to suggest, hey, look what's over here. Looks like a facet. And you sort of convince the eye it's really not there, but you just trick the eye into believing that it is. Alright, let's just grab a little bit of white here, and we'll see what happens. We'll see if it really makes that much difference. So it's simple. It's just literally a pure white and nothing else. This may have little or no impact, but you don't know till you try it. So once again, I'm going to take some of this and just put it closer to me so I have access. Now this, I really have to think of it in terms of a dot there, a dot there. I'm not going to be doing any lines with this. I'm just thinking in terms of these little, and focusing on this places like the shoulder here, on the neck. And again, see, it's a bright dot. Sorry if that got out of focus. Alright, let's pop in some here. They have to be small. Gotta be small, otherwise, just almost little dots. Like there's just that. It's sort of like the little dots that are reflecting now off of our eyes that we have sort of moisturized with the art coat. Here's another one. Just look into. Catch a few of these. That's, gotta remember where that white is. See, now this comes forward more. It sharpens that up. It makes our darks darker. It does a whole bunch of different things all at once. That's a hard working dot right there. It's really doing a lot for us. And the smaller these become, actually it's weird, the smaller the gemstones are, the more rounded they get. Which makes it that much more important to just sort of do this little white dot there on the surface. So yeah, look at that. That's getting pretty crunchy. And we'll see if we can get a couple of these here down on this where we've got the toenails here. Just on that upper surface. And, well, here, let's not forget that. So that's got a little oomph there, and I'm also, let's see if I can't maybe hit a couple of these teeth. And it's another one of these things where I'm, in effect, making that executive decision there. Said, okay, I know what's in the illustration. I don't think they're highlighted that bright there, but I just know that I have to, on my end, to get things to show up. Because otherwise, they just sort of get lost. Now, sometimes I like to actually throw the glossy stuff over the teeth as well. Gives it sort of a bit of a mucus look, I guess. Like there's some kind of saliva over the teeth. I might even go so far as to throw a few little lighter highlights there. It's just as I see all the gemstone highlights here, that's what puts that thought in my head. Okay. I do want to say thanks to everybody for all the support. It means a lot. I'm going to try and continue with these. Basically, alright, well, I'm working on this. Maybe I can make a video out of it. It may not be a totally complete controlled video like some of the, say, the Dark Sword ones or the army painting ones. But that's not what these are about. It sort of gives you just an impression of what it's like to have to sort of deal with things that get thrown at you here. And if there's a little bit of almost a buzzing sound in the background, well, that's the fans, because, well, now after the rain, then it's gotten super hot here. It went pretty much from the 40s to the 90s. So the paint may also be doing some weird things. Here we go. So I'm going to just secure a few of these to, remember, focusing on not drawing lines, but those spectral highlight dots. Same sort of thing that we would do on non-metallic metal. And if it's too much, then just wipe it away. Put a little bit back in. Going to add a few. Got some of these light dots onto here. So that is, yeah, that's really become a nicely faceted piece there. Only several thousand gemstones to do that on. So like I said, I'm going to do these other areas here on the top. That's going to be done off camera because we're looking at hours of doing that. Because you can see I still have to go over here and get this with just the stuff that's white. So there's I might try to do one of these as a YouTube Live. I got a smaller one. Maybe that's going to be YouTube Live. Today, well, also too, with it being when it's really, really warm, sometimes we get power fluctuations in the neighborhood, and well, if I'm just filming a video, I can shut the process down. If I'm in the middle of YouTube Live, that doesn't work so well. So I may have to do more inconsequential things as YouTube Live sessions and not critical stuff like this. I like the YouTube Lives because you can ask questions directly, and sometimes the questions that people ask during those, and there's several of you that are patrons that watch the YouTube Lives, well, then you can ask me directly. And speaking of which, if you haven't done that, I would suggest subscribing to the channel, because to get those notifications, you're not going to get them until you subscribe. I get notifications myself because I subscribe to a lot of different historical YouTube guys, so they're handy. I subscribe for a reason, because I want to know when they've got something new out instead of having to dig it out myself. And if you could drop a like on this video, believe it or not, I mean, it's not like it's monetized or public or anything like that, but every little bit of engagement just makes YouTube happy, and it gives me a little more flexibility here. They present me with more options when there is engagement on the videos. So like I said, I'll get you a little bit of a photo gallery on this so you can see, I mean, some close-ups of things, certainly just views like this. Now, once again, thanks again. I appreciate everybody watching this, and again, all the support on the Patreon page. So we'll be right with you with the next of these giant gemstone dragons. Thanks again.